Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast. We are here in lovely Plantation, Florida, at the luxurious Courtyard by Marriott. So Marriott will get that sponsorship money here in a minute. Mark Givler, Kevin Noon. Week 1 Southern Swing in the books. We have done our Georgia leg. Obviously, we had a stop in Charlotte on the way down, but first week was mostly about Georgia. Kevin, what have you learned so far on this trip?
Well, first thing I learned was I forgot my sunscreen, as I'm burnt up a little bit, but there's a lot of great talent out there that's very interested in Ohio State. I don't even know what year this is of Southern Swing. It's got to be at least 10. There's a lot of players that are sons of players that I remember watching very carefully, and now that they have sons that are rising seniors and rising juniors, I'm feeling incredibly old.
Well, let's start with that, because Jerome Bettis was a nice little surprise for us there at Woodward Academy. He just transferred in for this semester, so he hadn't been there very long. We talked to London Merritt at Woodward Academy as well in Atlanta out by the airport, and London's a player we've covered a lot. We've talked a lot about. He's a 2025 edge prospect, probably would be a kind of a jack type of player, which I think Ohio State kind of needs to figure out how serious they are about that position, and that'll probably impact how serious they are about London Merritt. But so far it's been pretty serious. He visited this spring. But Jerome Bettis Jr., to get back to where we were going with that, saying the right things. Ohio State hasn't offered yet, so again, this could all be a moot point if they don't offer, but there's no way he doesn't go to Notre Dame, right?
Well, you would think. Obviously there is a very strong legacy there, but he's a wide receiver. And what has Notre Dame done at wide receiver here as of late? If you are looking for the best path of your own development, then is that Notre Dame? Is that Ohio State? I mean, I think that Ohio State is proven to be WRU right now, wide receiver university, just with everything that has gone on and what is in store. But conversely, it's a very difficult room to crack at Ohio State. So, I mean, maybe that scares you off, too, if you're looking at things. But I don't know if Jerome Jr. is going to just sit there and say, well, the biggest thing here for me in my recruitment is appeasing my father. I think the biggest thing in his recruitment is going where he can get to the league. And in terms of wide receivers at Notre Dame, I'm not sold at this moment.
The one thing about like the kids of these former NFL, these NFL legends, is that they're always they're driven to kind of match what their dads did, or they want to kind of put their own stamp on things. So you can never kind of take that mindset out. You always have to take that into account. I would say that if Bettis Jr. played any other position, I wouldn't give Ohio State much thought here. But he's a receiver, and he was clearly enamored with what they're doing in the receiver room, clearly enamored with watching Marvin Harrison Jr. when they came up for spring practice, when he visited with London Merritt. And he's talking about coming back in the summer. And that would probably be a camp day. It would probably be a workout for Heartline. And look, if he has a great camp day and Heartline offers him, I think it's worth watching. I think it's probably going to be Notre Dame when the dust settles, because we can sit here and talk about receiver rooms and who's doing what with developmental wise, but it's also going to be a much easier depth chart for him to crack than Ohio State. So it's clear Notre Dame's a special place for him and his family, but I do think Ohio State's success at the receiver position keeps the door cracked if they eventually offer him. But he's had a great offseason, has picked up some big offers. I think Texas A&M jumped in recently, so he's starting to get the name out there. It was funny talking to him. He's not built at all like his dad, he made some funny comments about that. If you want to go watch our interview with him about kind of the difference in builds between him and his dad. He's a taller, leaner kid. He's almost 6'3", so just kind of different, but looks just like he got dad's face. You can look right at his face. Oh, that's Jerome Bettis' kid. So it's kind of surreal almost, growing up watching Jerome Bettis and then watching him as an adult when he's with the Steelers and everything. But and then seeing his kid look exactly like him in the face, but being kind of a totally different type of athlete. But yeah, that was a good stop. We did a lot in Georgia. Anything surprise you as far as maybe going in and being like, I don't know about this kid, or I don't know about Ohio State's chances with this kid, and maybe you've done a bit of a 180, or kind of what are some of your takeaways here?
I'll throw one out there, and I read your Skull session before we recorded this, and it's a kid I didn't know much about, and that's 2026 Deuce Gerald's. And you sit there and you look at a young kid like that at this point, and you expect one of two things. Either it's, I'm just so happy about everything, and you get nothing. There's no drill down, or they're just drilled down at being at home because they're 15 years old or whatever, and the thought of going away to college hundreds or thousands of miles away is still not something that they've totally processed yet, and being still so young. But in the conversations with Deuce Gerald's, I think that Ohio State certainly has some ends there, and that's not saying that I'm taking Ohio State against the field, but even going into that interview, I thought, okay, well, this will probably be the one and only time we talk to this player. Well, now I'm not convinced of that at all.
Yeah, he's been up to Ohio State twice now already. He camped last summer. They told him, we're going to watch some varsity film, see how you do in the fall. Brought him back up. He came up in the spring for an unofficial visit, sat down with Larry Johnson and those guys, and they offered him a scholarship. And there were a couple interesting things to me, but the real interesting thing was I tried to press him about other schools, and he just didn't really have much to say. But I asked, other top schools or schools that stood out to you, or who do you? And he's just like, everyone's kind of, everyone's even. But when I asked him about Ohio State, he was able to get very specific about what he liked about Ohio State, and you could see kind of perk up when he talked about Ohio State.
Well, he knew we were coming, and he dressed the part with the gloves.
Yes, and so he definitely put the Ohio State gloves on for practice that day, but seems enamored with Larry Johnson, and that probably could bring us into this next thing, is the Larry Johnson conundrum. So this is a catch-22 Ohio State, I think, is facing right now. On one hand, you want your position coaches to be kind of the driving force behind a lot of these recruitments. You want Brian Hartline to have great relationships with the receivers he's recruiting. You want Tony Alford to have great relationships with the running backs he's recruiting. Larry Johnson is very well known for building great relationships with the defensive linemen he recruits. But it's a bit of a conundrum right now for Ohio State because, and this has been going on for a few years now, and it's only going to get worse as the years go on here. Schools will tell kids, Larry Johnson's retiring. He's not going to be there for your college career. He's, this, that, and the other. And eventually they're going to be right. He can't coach forever. He's not immortal, as far as I know.
There can only be one.
Yeah. So, I don't think it's Larry. I don't think he's Scottish, but, we could be wrong. We could be wrong on that. But, yeah, it just it feels like they're in a bit of a catch-22 right now, where so many of these young defensive linemen are enamored with Larry Johnson, and at the same time, will they be able to stay in it if Larry does eventually announce a retirement at some point, even if it's him saying, hey, I've got 2 or 3 years left and then I'm retiring? How do you try to massage this if you're Ohio State?
Well, and he reduced Gerald's 2 to 3 years, and you're just getting on campus. I mean, so I think it's a situation of where Ohio State really needs to have a plan in place as to what life after Larry looks like. And it's not so easy. I mean, we see head coaching situations where there's the coach in waiting. I don't think you can necessarily have the D-line coach in waiting. I mean, I think we all know who, like, the linebacker coach in waiting is with James Laurinaitis, but how many different ways are you going to be able to do that type of situation? And conversely, if you're going from Larry Johnson, somebody who's been coaching forever, I'm not sure you necessarily want to go to a former player who has, like, very little coaching experience. So Ohio State has to sit there and be on, both sides of this thing of, Larry's our guy, but, moving forward, trust the system, trust the plan, trust everything. We've got you.
And yeah, again, it's just an interesting situation because Larry Johnson's doing exactly what you want Larry Johnson to be doing. You want Edric Houston to love Larry Johnson. You want Deuce Gerald's to love Larry Johnson. So it's just going to be interesting to see how that's massaged here, especially with the younger guys we've been seeing, the Deuce Geralds and Tyler Atkinsons of the world. We got another big-time defensive lineman we're going to see here, underclassman, and here in Florida in a few days. We'll be talking to him as well. So those are going to be the guys where I think you're going to really have to, whether it's drawing in Ryan Day more, drawing in another defensive coach more, and just making sure that you can they can love Larry Johnson, but that Larry isn't the only thing Ohio State has going for it in that particular recruitment. That's going to have to be the thing they massage here the next couple of years as we move forward with 25, 26, 27. Speaking of Edric Houston, I have not seen a better prospect in 2024 class nationally. There's some good quarterbacks in the class, some good defensive linemen. I mean, Dylan Stewart's a heck of a player. There's some guys out there, some really good defensive backs. I have not seen a better prospect than Edric Houston.
Well, I'll throw this one at you. Edric Houston, Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith has been called a generational type of player, and I don't disagree with that type of statement. Edric Houston is the type of guy that you expect to see go number 1 overall in an NFL draft. And now you're dealing with two different positions that are very much Cadillac in their own way. A defensive end you want to have out there however many snaps. A wide receiver is obviously not going to be targeted 45 times in a game, but Jeremiah Smith can completely take a game over. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. But I mean, everything I saw out of Edric Houston during his scrimmage against Norcross, I mean, I thought that he had the look of an alpha defensive end.
So Jeremiah is as good of a receiver prospect as I've ever seen. I don't say that lightly. There's like no knock. I can almost pick apart almost anyone's game. I can't really pick apart his game. There's really nothing I can say to pick apart his game, and I've seen a lot of him over the years. For me, it kind of comes down to like position value.
Right.
And I think everyone kind of has a different opinion on the rankings and what they're actually supposed to do. Or are you supposed to predict like who's going to win a Heisman Trophy? Or are you supposed to predict who's going to be the best player in college football? Or are you supposed to predict who is going to be a number 1 pick in the NFL draft? I kind of lean towards number 1 pick in the NFL draft, which means really your number 1 player, unless it's a really bad year at these positions simultaneously, which is almost impossible, your number 1 player should generally be a quarterback, a defensive lineman, or an offensive tackle. And so I would probably have Edric number 1, but I wouldn't have Jeremiah outside the top 3. I know that he would be in my top 2 or 3 for sure. Edric's ability he's 6'5", 250 already, so he's like 15 pounds heavier than Chase Young was as a senior at DeMatha. So he's already 250, but he's not one of those guys. Normally when I see 6'5", 250 in high school, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a 3-tech. He's not going to be a 3-tech. He's going to play defensive end. He's going to play it at 275. He's just going to be an absolute freak. And his ability to run and bend at that size was incredible. He's got incredible raw power. That was as special of an athlete as I've seen at the defensive end position, I think, in the last few years. I go back to like that Chase Young, Jalen Phillips class where I thought those were like the 2 best players in the country. And that's kind of where I would have Edric, like on that level. Just a special talent. And again, I liked the motor on Friday. Didn't take any plays off. Chased down. He made a tackle 30 yards downfield where he started on the left side, kind of followed the quarterback off to the right side. Then the quarterback scrambled back to the middle, followed him back to the middle. Quarterback throws it downfield. Edric takes off running. The receiver makes a kid miss in the secondary, and Edric tracks him down and makes a tackle. It was absolutely ridiculous. I have the video of it. I don't know if we'll get it up at some point. Unfortunately, it's a bad angle. I'm shooting it I'm shooting it from behind, so he's coming at me as a pass rusher. And because that's what you're normally going to do with the defensive lineman, you're not expecting him to make a play 30 yards downfield. So the wash and the 6'5" lineman kind of block out a little bit of it. So we'll see how well that kind of came out on video for us. But that was his most impressive play on a night where he had a bunch of impressive plays. So
yeah, I was worried that he didn't play in the first series. So
yeah, first couple.
We get there and we're like, all right, well, we'll make do. And then I think in the third series he finally trots out there and it's like, all right, and he didn't disappoint.
Yeah, he's special. You didn't get to talk to him. We're trying to get multiple kids after the game, and kids are getting on buses and going, getting on the team bus and going back to the school. So we couldn't sit there and do 10 minutes with 3 kids simultaneous or back to back to back. We got probably the wrath of the Buford coaching staff.
Right,
for
we
doing that.
were already pulling a fast one, getting them at Norcross.
Yeah, so I talked to Edric. August 22nd decision date, which I believe was news. I don't think he had that. I looked, he hadn't announced that. So August 22nd is his scheduled decision date now. He's going to visit Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, USC for officials over the summer. And he said he might try and sneak in 1 or 2 other ones now that they can take more than 5. Ohio State will be June 16th. It's been up twice. I'm still taking the field, but there's something there. He definitely likes Larry Johnson. He definitely, I think, is going to really be, I think the depth chart's going to be appealing. He's probably walking into a situation where he's one of the top 3 or 4 defensive ends on the roster immediately. You're going to get a lot of snaps probably. So I think they've got that going for them. I would take probably the Alabama, Georgia, Clemson trio as a grouping ahead of Ohio State. But, this is a kid that Ohio State's been a little bit optimistic on, a little bit more than maybe other people have. So it's one that I think they feel they have a shot with. They put a lot of time and resources into it. You got a chance to talk to a 2025 offensive lineman after the Buford game that really impressed us.
Yeah, Braden Jacobs, the son of Brandon Jacobs of Auburn. So feel really old. And he just transferred to Buford from a small private school in Alpharetta. St. Francis, I believe, was the name of it. So this was his first go-round playing with the big boys, playing with Buford and getting to go and hit somebody in a different color uniform and everything else. And 6'7", 310. Nobody at 310 is necessarily sitting there rocking like 3% body fat. I mean, he's got some weight that he's going to need to reshape, but he's a 2025. He's got 2 more years of high school football left to play, so I'm not overly concerned about any of that. Gets out there, just looks really good. I mean, he was able to get out there and just drive guys down into the ground. I mean, he seems to have a bit of a nasty streak into him. You sit down to an interview with him, he's very nervous at that point. I don't think he's done a lot of interviews, but hasn't really had a lot of conversation with Ohio State yet because he isn't a junior, so there are some severe limitations on how communications can work. Going to try and get up to Columbus this summer. Wasn't planning on camping, but, to be determined. We'll see. I talked to a lot of kids in May who in June, I see them out there on the field running around, and I just don't say anything. I don't need to sit there and say, "Oh, change your mind, did you?" No, the coach has changed his mind.
Yeah, so we'll be interested to see if he pops up. I know Ohio State's watching him and paying close attention to him so far early on. Buford's just a loaded program right now, so you're going to see Ohio State there, I think, quite a bit over the next several years, and so we'll see where things go there. We wrapped up Georgia with the Elite 11 Regional at Carrollton, just about maybe an hour outside of Atlanta.
Yeah, closer to Alabama than Atlanta.
Yeah, getting close to the border there. Look, news of the day was Aaron Nolan's performance. They don't give out MVPs at these anymore. They used to do kind of regional MVPs. They didn't really give out an MVP, so to speak, but they only invited one guy from that group to the Elite 11 finals. More will go out in the next week or two for sure. Like that group had a couple of guys at least that were going to be at the Elite 11 finals. But the only guy they offered the spot to that day was Aaron Noland, working with Jaden Davis in the same group, Michigan commit, former Ohio State target. Boy, that was fun.
I kicked the hornet's nest when I sat there and called this some sort of proxy battle between Ohio State and Michigan. A lot of Michigan fans were all over me. I said it was a proxy battle. I mean, no gold pants were awarded or anything else, but the coaches out there were very aware of who was out in the groups, and they were playing them against each other in the Ohio State-Michigan battle. Why can't I? But you had the opportunity to see them go out there and make a lot of throws. I mean, they went through 10 stations over the course of several hours. Each of them had to go and do a lot of varied things, whether or not it was a 5-yard out or it was a little post corner that they would have to run. And it was a lot of fun watching them throw. You could see some differences in terms of how their deliveries are different. Maybe their release angles are different. How is that going to translate to the next level? Well, I don't think we're going to be able to tell in the quote unquote underwear Olympics. But as for the what we saw at that point, Aaron Noland was going to certainly get that MVP in my opinion. I think he was really sharp.
Yeah, I thought he was the best guy there. The best performance of the day was Nolan's. It looks so weird to me watching lefties throw.
Yes.
It doesn't look as weird with him. He's got a throwing motion that I think is very repeatable. He really spins. He's got great velocity on his throws, but the consistent accuracy was what impressed me the most. And he's such an impressive kid off the field. The maturity and leadership. He's one of those kids that I think the fans are going to love, but his teammates are going to love. Just a proven winner. I think, again, you never want quarterback recruiting to kind of be chaotic like it was this year. But when the dust settles here, if assuming nothing weird happens with air in the next 8 months or whatever, I think they found a guy here who's going to can be the face of your program. You're going to be proud of that.
Yeah, quarterback recruiting, I think, is going to be very chaotic. How about that? Very chaotic moving forward for all major programs, just based on what is happening with the portal and everything else. I mean, just as recent as today, Georgia's had a quarterback commit, and then lo and behold goes out and lands Dylan Raiola. So what is that? How is that going to change any dominoes there? That would be a tremendous two-man quarterback class if they're able to pull that off. But we know that's difficult, and Georgia's sitting there with 3 inexperienced quarterbacks at this point trying to step in for Stetson Bennett. So how does that go? You look at Ohio State. Obviously, it has a couple of experienced quarterbacks, or one of them's not really that experienced, but you have Kyle McCord, you have Devin Brown. You'll be getting Lincoln Keenholz this summer. How do things cycle there? But yeah, I think Aaron Noland is going to be somebody that everybody will look back on and say, yeah, that one just fits, that one works, and it'll be interesting to see how that changes the dynamic of the room when he gets on campus in 24.
I've got a conspiracy theory here, as you talked about the Georgia situation. Ohio State, when they were still searching for their quarterback in this class, had interest in Ryan Puglisi, the other quarterback committed to Georgia. It would not shock me. My tinfoil. We don't have a tinfoil hat anywhere, do we? That's it. The timing of this is all very interesting because I think Ohio State at one point was trying to wait and let Raiola commit to Georgia, and then really push on Ryan to see if they get him up to campus and at least get a visit. Yet it just never happened, even though everyone's known for like 5 months Raiola was going to Georgia. I think Georgia waited until Ohio State I think Raiola and Georgia conspired to wait until Ohio State landed a quarterback before making the Raiola thing public. That's my conspiracy theory.
You're not going to end up on any sort of government list with that. That's barely a conspiracy, in my opinion. I think if this were MythBusters, I mean, I think I'm putting fact up there. I mean, at this point, it has to be plausible because we don't know for sure. But that seems pretty factual to me that they just had to kind of wait it out. I mean, I'm sure there were the people that thought he would follow family to Nebraska. There certainly was the USC talk and everything else, but that one, as soon as Georgia emerged as a team that was very interested in Raiola, that was going to happen. Now it'll be interesting to see the teams that don't have a quarterback for 24, how they push, because they're the ones that are certainly going to be upping the ante. Ohio State has its quarterback in Aaron Noland.
Yep, going to be fascinating. Quarterback dominoes is always fascinating, and it usually continues all the way to the end. It used to be quarterbacks locked in their spot 2 years early, and then there was, we were done talking about quarterback recruiting by the time that class were going into their junior seasons, and we were already looking ahead at the next quarterback classes. But now with the portal, NIL, and everything else, we're seeing movement like late in the cycle, like never before at the quarterback position. So that's always going to be interesting, I guess, to watch, hear what happens. I think Ohio State will be very happy to probably not be in that muck like they have been a couple times in recent years. Doesn't look like that'll happen this year, though.
You can turn your attention now to the Ryan Montgomery, Bryce Underwoods of the world, and put your focus on 25. And that doesn't mean that the staff is going to be able to stop recruiting Aaron Noland. You got to recruit him up until that LOI is in. But now, at this point, now you can sit there and start looking more toward 25 and certainly knowing maybe what directions you'd like to go in 26.
Big couple weeks coming up for 25 quarterback recruiting, because it's going to be camp season, college camp season here in a couple weeks. So Ohio State's going to have a lot of quarterbacks on campus throwing for them in June. Yeah, they got a big decision. Well, one of the decisions may be made for them, kind of depending what Bryce Underwood wants to do. But beyond beyond maybe being in the mix for Bryce Underwood, they've got a big decision in state. Ryan Montgomery, Tavian St. Clair out of Bellefontaine. So a lot of evaluation probably still to come here in the month of June. I know they're also doing some 7-on-7 stuff now in Ohio in May with their high school teams. There's a big one coming up. There's a couple big ones coming up that I'll be at, and so I think we may even see Corey Dennis at some of those to try and make heads and tails of this 2025 quarterback situation, because there's a lot of good options for them right now. But we are about to start our second leg of the trip. We're about to start the Florida leg, which is always interesting. It's all Florida's different, man. There's you never quite know what you're going to get out of these kids down here, coming out from interviews to flips and everything else. And so we're going to have plenty of good stuff here from Florida over the next several days, and hope everyone's been reading the stuff on BuckeyeHuddle.com. I know we're really happy with our engagement, our views. The numbers are starting to come in, and it seems like people are really enjoying this trip. So hopefully you guys keep it doing that. Sign up at BuckeyeHuddle.com to get kind of our insight. There's stuff that doesn't show up in the interviews that we're posting on the board there for our subscribers. You'll want to check all that out. If you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. And you can find this podcast and all of our other great podcasts by putting in Buckeye Huddle into podcast search on really any podcast platform that you guys use. It'll be on there. So give us a subscribe on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. But appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we will see you next time.